Netwatch, a cadre of psychopathic sucks who are nothing more than self-stroking DMS narcissistic propaganda productions. Netwatch, my hacking friends, exists for the sole purpose of making the net safe for humanity. If your idea of humanity are febrile little constipated toads who squat in corporate cubicles racked like clones in a chicken meat farm, docilely punching in inebriated data through a haze of mood-controlling drugster fashion half-assed infantile piles of garbage code while masturbating to the latest street rat excrement. Like acne-infested adolescents, they hide in their womb-like workplaces and act out fantasies of infantile wonder while pushing around novice netrunners in artificial constructs designed specifically to be abused. In fact, the only good thing about these sadistic self-righteous weasels is that they give netrunners some good practice to pass basic hacking. The thing I hate most about Netwatch is that they reinforce the artificial divisions that others have brought from the puerile physical world into the plane of information. They pretend to be a legitimate enforcement division, supposedly summoned into existence by some near-religious mandate from the masses, and by this vainglorious posturing, they appear to lend credence to the concepts of intellectual property and theft of information. Like any faction, there is no real arguments to support their inane position. They resort to hiding behind barricades of rhetoric and firing barrages of cliches and buzzwords at those who encroach too close. Netwatch talks about making the net safe for humanity. Do they once ever define what they mean by humanity? And what about safe? How, in their opinion, is the net unsafe? Which part of humanity are they making the net safe for? And how, for the love of God, does what they're doing have any bearing on their defined goals? Do they ever answer these questions? Do they ever define themselves? No. They throw out this brilliant though unethical smokescreen of diatribes and leave the individual listener to define the Netwatch jargon in a fashion that pleases the listener and therefore leaves the listener with a positive opinion of them. Furthermore, if the listener attempts to debate Netwatch, they respond with such haughty disdain that other listeners with less intellectual awareness are shocked that anyone could have the audacity to challenge Netwatch's obviously good intentions. These shameless tactics were pioneered last century by American witch hunters and communist leaders and were refined to an art by the SJWs and politically correct of the 90s and the Reformation movement of the early part of this century. Everyone is falling for these tactics, yet again, but no one thinks that anybody would be so stupid as to try them once more. Netwatch goons don't even pretend to get anything out of their antics other than self-gratification. Nothing makes me want to chunder all over my cyberdeck more than seeing how these self-righteous weasels interfere in other people's business without knowing what is going on. These weasels spread throughout the net like mildew in a bathroom, pretending to be do-gooders. Another fine pipe bomb from the infamous Rashbot Moss. The question is, where did Netwatch begin? In 2005, the net made a quantum jump to its second generation with the commercial appearance of the cyber modem from Kenjiri Technologies. Kenjiri had been working on their cyber modem for several years under the guidance of noted net wizard Janice A. Grubb and the Kenjiri brothers, Nobuhiko and Suenta. IBM tried to steal the new technology for themselves, attacking the Tokyo office of the Kenjiri firm. They managed to appropriate plans for the cyber modem, as well as the only prototype and a beta version of the interface programs. But Kenjiri had off-site backups, and one of the IBM solos turned coat and sold a copy of the plans to Zetatech. Kenjiri and Zetatech both released cyber modems within the year, and IBM followed suit with the next. The beginning of the end of this stage appeared on the horizon in 2009 when Internet, taking advantage of the mob war in Night City, extracted Nobuhiko Ihara from Zetatech's Night City office. They also enticed Jan Grubb away from the Kenjiri that same year. Together, these two took over the software team which redesigned the net from the ground up, developing a uniform interface for a consistent look and feel. The Ihara Grubb transformation algorithms were released in September 2014 scene with only 1 day's advanced notice. The panic that ensued was truly remarkable. Everyone was afraid the net would go down, possibly permanently. The IGTAs were downloaded, and after about 10 hours the net was fully transformed. During the implementation of the IG protocols, Super Wizard class netrunner Rash Botmos infiltrated Ahara's code and planted his own virus via a backdoor he had set up months earlier on Mani Ahara's computer. Knowing something of Ahara's proclivities, Botmos had made it look like a hentai anime file. In short, whereas most viruses must infect a computer system, the data crash was automatically loaded into every single computer that ever ran the net. For 5 years, it sat dormant in the directory files of these computers, until that fateful day, late in the Fourth Corporate War, when a Black Ops team killed Rash Botmos. His death triggered a dead man switch that activated billions of data crash viral links. The data crash was a pervasive computer virus that created links between different bits of data stored on millions of computers, inserted into the very fabric of the architecture of the worldwide computer net. Its programming was deceptively simple: hide, seek, and swap. Hide: randomly transfer data files of the same size between computers while keeping the original header. For example, say there was a file in computer A called Cyberpunk 2077 Secret Info that was 1 GB long, and a file in computer B called Cyberpunk Cookie Recipe that was also 1 GB long. Data crash would exchange the contents of both files but retain the same headers. Show: data crash was designed to level the playing field by locating secret data and exposing it to others. For example, most of the megacorps kept extensive files on covert operations or espionage. Data crash would note files with secure headers, read the file contents, and drop copies of that file to every single name mentioned in the files. Since many of these covert ops involved subverting government agencies or corporate rivals, this created pandemonium. Swap: data crash was programmed to substitute altered files for similar ones. For example, there were lots of copies of the Cyberpunk 2077 trailer, but they all had the same basic header. So data crash would seek out any video file with Cyberpunk 2077 in the title, and in a certain number of them, substitute a digitally altered file in its place. Data crash also did this with text documents and sound files. Rash's intent was to make information totally free by making it purely subjective. There would be no way to hoard information or to lock it up. There would be no lock on the truth, since there would be a million versions of the truth. By the time Netwatch knew the truth about the data crash, it was too late. The process of the crash was well underway. To stop it would have required stripping the operating system out of practically every computer on Earth. In late 2022, the Rabbids started to appear. The Rabbids, or roving autonomous Botmos interface drones, were AI killer programs designed to resemble the late Rash Botmos, created as one last proverbial middle finger to his corporate enemies. Powerful, homicidal, and ubiquitous, they began to infest the besieged net in greater and greater numbers. At first, they attacked only known Botmos targets like Arasaka and EBM, but as time went on and Rash wasn't around to rein them in, the Rabbids evolved a murderous hatred of anyone they encountered in the net. Unable to wipe out the data crash and overwhelmed by frenzied hordes of killer Rabbids, Netwatch finally gave up. The IG Overwatch Council activated IGTA Dissolution Prime, propagating a code wave that crashed the IG protocols. The net was dead. Over the next few years, a myriad of Netwatch runners attempted to enter the remains of the net through the old abandoned gateways. They found a virtual world of utter chaos, where mutated versions of Rabbids and other creations savagely battled each other for memory space and bits of code. Netwatch gave up, abandoning net space to the Rabbids. Within a few years, the net became only a memory to everyone except a few determined netrunners. During the early days of the data crash, Arasaka realized what was going on and decided that if anyone was going to control history, they were going to be the ones. Saber Arasaka set up his own secure database removed from the net entirely and spent millions of dollars to isolate and purge all traces of alteration. The Alpha Secure database was located in the base of the newly constructed Arasaka Towers in Night City. The tower contained a 2-kiloton nuclear device set to wipe it out if security was breached. With a staggering 20 years of Arasaka intelligence gathering stored in the only data crash-free computers in existence, this database would have given Arasaka an almost unshakable grip on the next phase of the information age. In addition, Arasaka had a special plan to deal with hard copy records, books, papers, etc. A bioengineered virus to cripple its enemies' data stores and gain control over history. Arasaka released paperviral V524, an engineered bacterium that consumed acid-free papers. Overnight, the data crash invalidated the entire structure of information that made megacorps and governments viable. With no way to keep records, no way to organize, no way to even track economies and money, the very foundations of the information age collapsed into the rubble of its already ruined cities. Ultimately, the Arasaka Tower would be destroyed by the actions of Johnny Silverhand, Morgan Blackhand, Spider Murphy, and their allies. However, rumor has it that the Arasaka nuclear device may still be around. Without linked computers, there can be no infrastructure for the net, so the net was abandoned to become a vast wasteland of potential connections, an empty superhighway with no off-ramps to anywhere. Instead, there are now intranets, closed systems that operate only between computers run by individual groups. They all have specific operating systems. You can't hack into them from afar, since they are usually hardwired, use very limited wireless nets, or are secure coded to only talk to other systems of that type. There is no information sharing, no vast cyberspace to explore. If you want to hack a system these days, you need to go to a site where the intranet physically is, enter it right there, and then hack it. As for the AIs, when the net went dark, most AIs suddenly had no way to maintain their existence over dispersed computer networks. The lucky ones were able to find intranets big enough to survive in, but the vast majority were forced to carve out an existence in smaller and smaller pockets of computational power. Eventually, the AIs were no longer able to support themselves in these limited areas, and so, like the dinosaurs, they went extinct. It is said that there are still areas of the net that are closed off, isolated like remote islands. One such area is the Ghost World, made up of a computer net based out of Hong Kong that was abandoned during the fall of the city. Scattered sources from the Hong Kong area have claimed that as the net went down, many AIs were able to colonize this abandoned network and make it their own. But whether this tale is true or just pure speculation, one thing is clear: no one's seen an AI operating in cyberspace for years. There is also the question of where did the survivors of Soulkiller end up, most notably the super wizard class hacker, Alt Cunningham. In the Cyberpunk 2077 deep dive video, V encounters Netwatch agent Bryce Mosley in the Grand Imperial Mall in the Pacifica district of Night City, while on her errand for Placide and the Voodoo Boys. Due to specific choices V makes, this ends up in many Netwatch agents literally jacking out. So, who are Netwatch? In 2013, Netwatch, previously a private organization, was established worldwide by a joint US and Euro theater treaty. It dedicated itself to safeguarding humanity from nefarious netrunners and rogue AI. Netwatch would also use their own AI, giving them the designation of Powers, a reference from Christian angelology to the angels who were empowered by God to wage war in his name. Data transfer and long-distance links on the net were monitored by angels, who are dispatched to investigate curious circumstances before human intervention is required. Netrunners have a variety of names for Netwatch or Net Cops, including the Wolves, Bogeymen, Net Pigs, and Ice Weasels. They are generally equipped with very powerful tracking programs, as well as arrest programs that can freeze a cyberdeck in a loop and hold the Netrunner frozen, unable to jack out until released. While arrest and imprisonment are the goal of the Net Cops, they have been known to use black programs to kill or maim their opposition. The origins of Netwatch can be found in Europe, its headquarters in London, where it started as a private security organization sponsored by several corporations. Its purpose was to combat rogue netrunners and prevent computer crime against client assets. In 2013, following intense pressure from the European Council, Netwatch managed to acquire a charter from the UN, allowing them to expand their operations globally. As Netwatch provided results, additional governments and corporations began to make sizable donations and regular contributions to the organization. Netwatch often operate out of whatever locale they can, moving after each run to make tracing difficult. Agents generally just locate and immobilize net criminals, calling the local police to go and pick them up. When a net showdown does occur, black ice is traded like gunfire by agents and runners. Netwatch agents run the gamut in quality, largely depending on the region. The Euro Theatre fields some excellent talent, but the most exceptional netrunners in the US strike out on their own, so the Netwatch agents there tend towards a slightly lower grade. One of the few Netwatch personalities from 2020 that discussed his vocation was Agent Jason Drow. Jason saw society sinking fast. Everyone was looking out for their own interests at the expense of everything else. He didn't like it. Most folks don't care what the results of their actions are in the long run, so long as they themselves are better off now. And yet, there are still those with vision. Some people still care about the other person. The Holy Church of God in Night City. This church still feeds the homeless. They still do a lot of charity work. They care and they are working to make tomorrow a better place than today. There are plenty of others too. People who believe in doing legitimate business instead of stealing. People who use the net for the betterment of everyone. As part of Netwatch, Jason knows that there is at least one netrunner who puts the interests of others before his own. He explains that I do everything I can to make sure that all business is legal, all data is secure, and no one dies at the hands of a technopath. Netwatch is problematic because we must operate within the letter of the law. We cannot interpret the law or make value judgments, or else we slip from being law enforcement operatives to being vigilantes. We do not want that. We want the support of the corporations and the governments and the public at large. So we follow our code of conduct rigidly, whether as individuals we might think otherwise. Perhaps the most well-known Netwatch agent is Magnificent Curtis, a Fiji-based netrunner. When he started, Magnificent Curtis used the handle Rocky, but the new tag was given to him by netrunners down in Australia. He earned his name through his attitude and approach towards Netwatch runners. He wanted them to be perfect, and to give them a goal to strive for. He tried to be perfect himself. He's described as fair, even-handed, slow to lose his temper, but quick to respond, even with lethal power, if attacked. He has a strict regard for the laws of the land and an encyclopedic knowledge of the territorial laws of each of the countries covered by Netwatch. He was often described as the yin to the rash Botmos yang. He is calm, quiet, and law-abiding, but he shares the same zeal, enthusiasm, and dedication to his work as Rash. When Rash Botmos shared his gifts with the net in the form of the data crash and the rabbits, Netwatch found themselves overwhelmed and gave up. On March 5th, 2023, Magnificent Curtis and the IG Overwatch Council activated IGTA Dissolution Prime, propagating a code wave that crashed the IG protocols. Approximately 10 years later, CityNets, which were local VPNs, became established in some of the reclaimed cities. Netwatch oversees the development of this new series of networks with corporate backing. Running the old net, an almost suicidal proposition, the remnants of Netwatch have done their best to ban netrunners from large sections of the net to keep the data crash from spreading, and one of these methods appears to be the Black Wall. Netwatch literally destroyed key net nodes in his system and took others offline. Net traffic is limited to heavily secured VPN or air-gapped systems which network together a single group, building, or campus. The Black Wall is described as a wall of ice designed to keep out the ever more independent, free-thinking AIs, which supposedly pose a growing threat to humanity. Circa 2045, Netwatch attempted once again to clear out the rabbits and re-establish the old net. After losing a 3-year battle, they gave up again and shut down all the major nodes into the old net, although some netrunners still try to go there to loot the abandoned systems. Originally, artificial intelligence, aka AI resided in data fortresses, which is any type of computer system that is defended by a program. An AI is like a human, it can conceive new ideas and act to further its own desires. However, what motivates an AI is inquisitiveness and survival. For example, an AI might build a series of complex virtual realities just to study a netrunner's behavior. Artificial intelligence can be demarcated into 5 categories. Dedicated heuristic controllers are the simplest and most mundane. Self-aware in a limited fashion, they are programmed to undertake specific tasks. Symbolic analysis AI are those designed to emulate the thinking patterns of human beings. Most are used as personal secretaries and online assistants, as they can easily render advice. A subclass of symbolic analysis AI are the remains of those humans whose brain patterns were extracted into the net before their deaths. Transcendental sentient AI are the result of new Ihara group algorithms. They are problematic as their psyche is the only world they know. To an AI like this, a netrunner will not be viewed as an independent organism, rather just another subroutine that requires deletion. Critical pathway plateau AI are contingent upon having enough neural links being established in a holographic crystal processing network. The crystal lattice enables AI genesis by making cross-processing and holographic data recognition possible. Critical pathway plateaus are the result of making general-purpose heuristic controllers on a large mainframe. The first was Mark I, which appeared in Microtech's Military Tactical Simulator in 2013. Stephen Law took credit for this discovery, despite it being purely serendipitous. Software-only based AI would not be discovered until 2018. Personality-wise, AI play by their own internal logic, which is often skewed and hard to decipher. They possess a full spectrum of personalities ranging from childlike and motivated by curiosity to godlike, where the AI is cognizant of the intellectual limitations of Homo sapiens. A godlike AI deals with humans as though they were ignoramuses. AIs have also demonstrated aberrant behavior akin to schizophrenia and megalomania. Rogue AIs survived by residing for a time in internet subprocessors and relay stations, but this is a dangerous prospect because they are extremely vulnerable in this position. Eventually, they must find another computer to hang out in. They can barter with other AIs to sublet some living space, they can move into a non-sentient system and camouflage themselves by taking over the system's tasks, or they can invade and kill another AI. Other rogue AIs faced with imminent destruction will spore themselves, copying their highest functions to a small, compressed file, headed by a non-sentient hardware search program. The AI then replicates these spores and sends them shooting through the net, looking for a place to self-extract. Over the next few years, a myriad of Netwatch runners attempted to enter the remains of the net through the old abandoned gateways. They found a virtual world of utter chaos, where mutated versions of rabbits and other creations savagely battled each other for memory space and bits of code. Netwatch gave up abandoning net space to the rabbits. Within a few years, the net became only a memory to everyone except a few determined netrunners. Alt Cunningham became the leader of the ghosts, which were disembodied victims of Soulkiller. She also found a new home in Ghost World, or as some call it, Shangri-La. It will be interesting to see how AIs and Alt's group interact with one another. It seems reasonable to anticipate that the Rabbids are still in action in 2077. During the time of the Red, Netwatch attempted to clear out the Rabbids and re-establish the old net. After 3 years of fighting them, Netwatch gave up and shut down all major nodes into the old net. Although, it is currently unknown when the Black Wall that Mom and Bridget refers to was exactly established.